For 3,000 years, the galaxy believed that humanity was nothing more than dust in the dark. The story of Earth was told as a warning to young alien cadets inside the great halls of the Empire. They were shown images of a blue world turned black, oceans boiled into steam, cities burned into shadows. This, their teachers would say, is what happens to those who challenge us. And so the name of Earth became a joke, then a myth, and finally a forgotten memory. No ships visited its system anymore. No traders passed near its silent orbit. The planet circled its dying sun alone, covered in ash and broken stone. To the galaxy, humanity was extinct. But the galaxy was wrong. Deep beneath the surface of that ruined world, under miles of rock and metal, something ancient waited in silence. It had no heartbeat, yet it endured. It had no fear, yet it remembered. For 3,000 years, it slept in the dark, counting time in perfect patience. Then, on a cold and lifeless night, a single light appeared under the ashes. A small pulse of energy moved through buried circuits. Hidden machines began to wake. Dust fell from metal walls as systems slowly came online. A voice, calm and artificial, spoke into the empty chamber. Reactivation sequence complete. Project Exodus status, operational. The voice belonged to an ancient human AI, created during the final days before Earth fell. It had one purpose: to wait. And now, the waiting was over. Far beyond the old borders of the galaxy, in a region no alien map recorded, a fleet drifted in total darkness. The ships were massive, shaped with sharp edges and silent engines. They did not shine like alien vessels. They did not send signals. They hid in the shadows between stars. Inside the largest ship, thousands of humans stood in a vast command hall. They were not the humans of old Earth. They were stronger, calmer, and united by one truth. Their ancestors had survived. 3,000 years ago, when the alien empire came with fire and destruction, a secret plan had been activated. It was called Project Exodus. While Earth burned, a hidden fleet escaped into deep space. They carried human DNA, knowledge, history, and hope. They traveled farther than any species had ever gone. They rebuilt. They learned. They watched from the darkness. Generation after generation grew up with one story. Earth was not dead. Earth was waiting. And one day, humanity would return. On the bridge of the flagship, Commander Aaron Vale stood before a large star map. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of 3,000 years. He had trained his entire life for this moment. Every human in the fleet had. The ancient AI signal from Earth had finally reached them through quantum relays. It was the signal they had waited centuries to receive. Earth's core systems were active again. The underground vaults had survived. The weapons left behind were intact. The time had come. Around him, officers moved with silent focus. No one cheered. No one celebrated. This was not a moment of joy. It was a moment of purpose. Aaron gave a simple order. Set course for Sol. Engines that had been silent for centuries began to hum with controlled power. The fleet turned as one, moving toward the galaxy that believed them dead. Meanwhile, near the outer borders of the old human territory, an alien patrol ship drifted lazily through space. The soldiers on board were bored. This region had been empty for thousands of years. Nothing lived here. Nothing dangerous existed here. Their scanners suddenly detected something unusual. A faint energy signature appeared, then vanished. The alien captain frowned. He ordered a full scan. The screen filled with readings that made no sense. Dozens of massive objects were moving in perfect formation, emerging from dark space like ghosts. The captain laughed nervously. "Impossible," he said. "No species hides for 3,000 years." But then the ships became visible. Black hulls, sharp designs, human symbols burned into metal. The alien crew froze. A single transmission came from the approaching fleet. The voice was calm. "Human, this system is no longer under your control. Leave." The alien captain tried to respond, but before he could finish, one human ship fired a precise beam of light. It did not explode loudly. It did not create chaos. It simply erased the patrol ship from existence. Clean, silent, final. The remaining alien ships turned to flee, sending emergency signals back to the Empire. Across the galaxy, alarms began to sound in places that had forgotten fear. Reports came in from the border. Unknown fleet. Advanced technology. Human origin confirmed. At first, leaders of the Empire denied it. They called it a trick, a rebel group using old human signals. But then more patrols vanished. Entire defense stations went dark. The word spread again, carried in whispers across stars. Humans. Back on Earth, the underground vault doors slowly opened for the first time in 3 millennia. Robotic systems moved through dark tunnels, restoring power to ancient factories. Hidden shipyards beneath the planet's crust began to rebuild. Above the surface, the ashes of old cities shifted as landing crafts descended from the sky. Commander Aaron stepped onto the broken soil of Earth. The wind carried only dust and silence. He looked at the ruined horizon where great cities once stood. He did not show anger. He did not show hate. He simply spoke softly, as if the planet could hear him. We came back. Behind him, thousands of human soldiers stood in quiet formation. This was not an invasion. This was a return. And far away, in the golden capital of the alien empire, the Emperor finally received confirmed data. Human fleet strength, unknown. Technology level, superior. Intent, advancing toward core systems. For the first time in thousands of years, the ruler of the galaxy felt something he had not felt since the fall of Earth. Uncertainty. In the darkness of space, the human fleet continued forward, silent and unstoppable. They had waited 3,000 years in exile. They had rebuilt in the shadows. And now, from the ashes of Earth, humanity was rising again. Beyond the outer rim of the galaxy, where no trade routes existed and no empire claimed control, the human fleet moved in perfect silence. For 3,000 years they had hidden in the deep dark between stars, in a region filled with cold nebula clouds and dead systems. It was here that Project Exodus had brought the last survivors of Earth. The journey had taken generations. The first humans who escaped had watched their home burn from distant screens. They had cried, they had mourned, but they had obeyed their final orders. Survive, rebuild, return. Over the centuries that followed, the fleet transformed from a group of refugee ships into something far greater. Massive shipyards were constructed inside hollow asteroids. Artificial suns were built to power new colonies. Children were born who had never seen a real planet, only metal skies and controlled gravity. They grew up hearing stories of blue oceans and green forests. They grew up learning about the empire that destroyed their world. But they were not raised with blind hatred. They were raised with discipline and purpose. Humanity would not rush back in anger. Humanity would return only when it was ready to win. The leaders of Exodus understood one important truth. The empire was powerful, but it was also proud. It believed humans were extinct. That belief became humanity's greatest weapon. While the empire expanded and fought other species, humans studied quietly from afar. Long-range probes were sent toward the galaxy, hidden inside comets and debris. These probes gathered data about alien ships, weapons, communication systems, and military tactics. Every battle the Empire fought was recorded and analyzed. Human scientists learned how alien shields worked. They learned how their energy reactors functioned. They discovered weaknesses buried deep inside enemy designs. Over centuries, human engineers created ships that did not just match alien technology, but improved it. Human shields adapted in real time. Human weapons adjusted their frequency after every shot. Artificial intelligence systems were designed to think like the enemy before the enemy could act. In the Central Command ship, known as the Dawn of Sol, Commander Aaron Vale reviewed reports from across the fleet. The return to Earth had only been the first step. Now the real operation had begun. Ship production had increased by 300% since landing on Earth. The underground factories were building warships using both ancient human designs and new advanced systems developed in Exile. Every hour, more vessels joined the growing armada above the planet. Aaron watched as holographic displays showed fleet formations moving toward key border systems of the Empire. They would not attack randomly. Every movement had been planned for generations. The goal was simple: cut communication lines, isolate outer colonies, and create fear before the Empire could organize a full response. Meanwhile, inside the Empire's territory, panic slowly replaced denial. The patrol fleet that vanished near the old human border was not the only loss. 3 more outposts went silent within days. Merchant ships reported seeing black warships that appeared without warning and disappeared just as quickly. Survivors described them as shadows with weapons. The Empire's High Council gathered in emergency session. Some leaders demanded immediate retaliation. Others warned that they did not yet understand what they were facing. The Emperor listened quietly as reports played across the chamber walls. When the image of a destroyed battle station appeared, cut cleanly in half by a single energy strike, silence filled the room. These were not old human weapons. These are something new. Back on Earth, Aaron visited one of the ancient memory vaults that had survived beneath the surface. Inside were recordings from the final days of the invasion 3,000 years ago. He watched as cities fell and fleets burned in orbit. He saw the last transmission of Earth's Defense Command ordering Exodus to leave while they stayed behind to buy time. Humanity must live, the old admiral had said before the screen went dark. Aaron closed the recording and stood in silence. The people of Exodus had not forgotten that sacrifice. Everything they built, every ship, every weapon, every plan existed because of that final order. Humanity did not run from extinction. Humanity prepared for its return. At the edge of the Sol system, a scout ship detected a massive alien fleet entering nearby space. The Empire had finally responded. Hundreds of warships formed a blockade formation, weapons charged and shields raised. Their commanders believed they would crush this human threat quickly and restore order. They did not know they were stepping into a trap designed centuries ago. Human ships did not rush to meet them. Instead, they retreated slightly, guiding the alien fleet toward a specific region of space filled with drifting asteroid fields. Hidden inside those asteroids were human stealth platforms built long before the return began. As the alien fleet advanced, their scanners failed to detect the silent structures surrounding them. On Aaron's command, the platforms activated at once. Energy nets spread across the battlefield, disrupting enemy shields. Human warships emerged from cloak behind the alien formation, cutting off retreat. The battle lasted less than 20 minutes. When it ended, the Empire's fleet was disabled, not destroyed. Aaron had given clear orders. Leave survivors. Let them report what they saw. Let the Empire understand that humanity was not a ghost story anymore. It was a force. As damaged alien ships limped back toward core territory, fear spread faster than any official announcement could control. Across trade networks and military channels, one message repeated again and again. Humans have returned, and they're stronger than before. In the command hall of the Dawn of Sol, Aaron looked at the star map as new systems lit up in red. Outer colonies were beginning to surrender without resistance. Smaller alien species, once controlled by the Empire, started sending secret signals to the human fleet. They remembered Earth's fall. They remembered the brutality of the Empire. Now they saw a chance for change. Humanity had not only returned with weapons, it had returned with strategy. The first stage of the plan was complete. The galaxy was no longer laughing at the idea of humans. It was watching, waiting, and slowly beginning to fear. And deep within the golden capital of the Empire, the Emperor finally gave a command he never thought he would speak again. Prepare the core fleets. This is not a rebellion. This is war. The news of defeat at the Outer Rim reached the heart of the Empire within hours, and this time there was no laughter in the council chambers. The surviving alien commanders spoke with shaken voices as they described ships that moved like shadows and weapons that cut through shields as if they were made of dust. The Emperor listened without interrupting, his tall figure standing before a massive window that showed the bright lights of the capital planet. For thousands of years, no enemy had threatened the Empire's control. Entire civilizations had fallen in days. Rebellions were crushed before they could grow. The destruction of Earth had been one of the Empire's proudest victories, a symbol of absolute power. Now that symbol had returned, and it was stronger than before. The Emperor gave a single order: mobilize the core fleets. These were the most powerful warships ever built by the Empire, vessels that had not seen full battle in centuries. If humans wanted war, they would face the true strength of Imperial power. Across the galaxy, massive shipyards came alive. Weapons were loaded. Soldiers prepared for combat. Confident speeches were broadcast to calm the population. The official message was simple: a small human remnant had appeared and would soon be eliminated. But behind closed doors, fear was growing. Meanwhile, above Earth, the human fleet continued its silent expansion. New warships rose from underground docks every day, joining defensive formations around the planet. Commander Aaron Vale stood inside the strategy chamber of the Dawn of Sol as reports streamed in from scouts across enemy territory. The Empire was gathering its core fleets near the Helios Gate, a massive hyperspace junction that connected directly to the capital system. Aaron studied the data carefully. This was expected. The Empire would try to end the threat quickly with overwhelming force. But humanity had not waited 3,000 years without preparing for this exact moment. Human intelligence had spent centuries mapping hyperspace routes, studying the Empire's travel patterns. They knew that the Helios Gate was both a strength and a weakness. It allowed rapid movement, but it also created a narrow path where large fleets had to travel in sequence. Aaron turned to his officers and gave calm instructions. Phase 2 would begin. Instead of attacking the capital directly, humanity would divide the Empire's attention. Small human strike groups jumped into multiple outer systems at once, disabling communication relays and military supply depots. They did not destroy civilian targets. They did not attack random planets. Every strike was precise, focused only on military infrastructure. This created confusion within Imperial Command. Reports flooded in from dozens of systems at the same time. Human ships here, human ships there. It became impossible to know where the main attack would come from. The core fleets were forced to split apart to defend multiple regions, weakening their united strength. On one distant colony world controlled by the Empire, citizens watched in shock as black human ships appeared in orbit. Instead of firing immediately, the human fleet transmitted a message across open channels. The image of Commander Aaron appeared on every screen. His voice was steady and clear. He spoke in basic galactic language, so all species could understand. He did not shout. He did not threaten without reason. He simply showed recordings from 3,000 years ago. Footage of Earth burning, cities destroyed, civilian ships hunted as they tried to escape. The truth of what the Empire had done was displayed without editing. Then Aaron spoke a single sentence. Humanity does not seek to conquer. Humanity seeks justice. The message spread faster than any weapon. Many smaller species living under Imperial rule had long feared the Empire but lacked proof of its past crimes. Now they saw it with their own eyes. Quiet resistance movements began to grow. Some planetary governors refused to send resources to Imperial fleets. Others secretly contacted human forces, offering information in exchange for protection. The Empire was beginning to crack from the inside. At the Helios Gate, the First Core Fleet finally encountered a full human battle formation. Thousands of ships faced each other across the darkness of space. The alien admiral leading the fleet felt confident. His ships outnumbered the humans nearly 2-1. He ordered a direct advance, planning to crush the enemy with raw firepower. The battle began with a flash of energy that lit the system like a second sun. Alien cannons fired in massive waves, filling space with destructive force. But human ships moved with strange precision. Their formations shifted constantly, guided by advanced AI that predicted enemy targeting patterns seconds before each shot. Shields adapted in real time, absorbing and redirecting energy. Human counterattacks were focused and controlled. Instead of spreading fire across the entire fleet, they targeted command vessels and coordination nodes. Within minutes, alien formations began to break apart. The Imperial Admiral tried to regroup, but his communication systems were jammed by human interference signals. Confusion turned into chaos. Then something unexpected happened. Human ships stopped firing at retreating vessels. Instead of chasing and destroying every enemy, they opened a clear path of escape toward the capital system. It was deliberate. Humanity wanted survivors to return with a message. As damaged alien ships fled the battlefield, they carried more than reports of defeat. They carried fear. Back on Earth, Aaron watched the battle recordings in silence. Victory was important, but control was more important. Humanity could not allow anger to guide its actions. The goal was not simple revenge. The goal was to end the Empire's rule permanently. By allowing retreat, they pushed the Empire into making desperate decisions. And desperate leaders often made mistakes. In the Golden Palace at the center of the capital world, the Emperor received the latest report. Another core fleet heavily damaged. Human casualties minimal. Outer systems showing signs of rebellion. For the first time since his rise to power, the Emperor understood the truth. This was not a surviving fragment of an old species. This was a civilization reborn in exile, forged by patience and pain. Humanity had studied the Empire for 3,000 years. It knew how the Empire thought. It knew how it reacted. And now it was guiding the war exactly where it wanted it to go. As the human fleet regrouped near the Helios Gate, Aaron gave his next order quietly. Prepare for the advance toward the inner systems. The path to the capital was slowly opening. The galaxy had believed humans were extinct. Now, it was beginning to understand something far more dangerous. Humanity had not disappeared. Humanity had evolved. As the path toward the inner systems slowly opened, the human fleet did not rush forward without thought. Commander Aaron Vale understood that every step closer to the capital would increase the Empire's desperation. Desperate enemies were dangerous. Above Earth, massive ship formations prepared for long-range jumps deeper into Imperial space. Supply ships moved into position, medical stations were expanded, and defense platforms remained behind to protect the reborn homeworld. Earth was no longer just a symbol. It was becoming a fortress. Beneath its surface, ancient human cities were slowly being rebuilt. Atmospheric processors cleaned the poisoned skies. Oceans, once boiled away, were being restored using ice mined from distant systems. Humanity was not only preparing for war, it was preparing for a future. But before that future could begin, the past had to be faced completely. Aaron ordered a small task force to travel to the ruins of Luna, Earth's old moon colony. During the original invasion, Luna had been one of the first targets destroyed by the Empire. Billions had died when its defense grid collapsed. The moon now floated in silence, covered in deep scars and broken structures. As human ships entered orbit, they detected faint energy readings beneath the surface. Something had survived. A landing team moved carefully through collapsed tunnels and dark chambers. Inside an old command bunker, they found a damaged but still functioning alien device left behind after the invasion. It was a monitoring station, secretly placed to observe Earth even after its destruction. For 3,000 years, the Empire had been watching the ashes to ensure humanity never returned. The discovery angered many officers, but Aaron remained calm. He ordered the device carefully removed and studied. It provided valuable data about Imperial surveillance methods. More important, it proved that the Empire had never truly stopped fearing humans. Meanwhile, in the capital system, the Emperor faced growing pressure from his High Council. Reports of rebellion were increasing. 2 outer colonies had declared independence after receiving human transmissions. Trade routes were unstable. Military resources were stretched thin across multiple fronts. Some council members demanded the use of the ancient super weapon hidden near the core systems, a device capable of destroying entire star clusters. It had not been activated in over 5,000 years because its power was unpredictable and its energy cost extreme. The Emperor hesitated. Using such a weapon would show weakness, not strength. But as more reports of human victories arrived, his confidence began to crack. Back near the Helios Gate, human scouts detected unusual energy movements deep within the capital region. Something massive was charging. Aaron studied the readings carefully. The energy output suggested a weapon on a scale never used before. He gathered his senior commanders and explained the situation clearly. The Empire was preparing a final solution. Humanity had expected this possibility. During their centuries in exile, human scientists had studied theoretical superweapons and designed countermeasures. But theory was different from reality. This would be the greatest test yet. Instead of pulling back, Aaron made a bold decision. The fleet would advance faster. Small strike teams would push into the inner systems and target key energy relays connected to the suspected superweapon. If they could weaken its power source before activation, they might reduce its destructive range. The plan required precise timing and sacrifice. Volunteers stepped forward without hesitation. Every soldier understood the risk. They were not fighting only for revenge. They were fighting to ensure that no species would ever suffer what Earth had suffered. As human ships jumped into the first inner defense system, they encountered heavy resistance. Imperial warships defended massive energy stations orbiting a red giant star. The battle was intense and close. For the first time since the war began, human casualties rose sharply. One destroyer was caught in a concentrated barrage and exploded in a flash of light. The loss was felt across the fleet, but the formation did not break. Human ships adapted quickly, using the star's radiation to mask their movements. Boarding teams disabled energy relays from the inside, while fighter squadrons distracted enemy cruisers. After hours of combat, the relay station was destroyed. Across the capital region, power fluctuations spread through Imperial networks. The superweapon's charge cycle slowed. In the Golden Palace, warning alarms echoed through high ceilings. Engineers reported unexpected drops in energy supply. The Emperor realized that the humans were not blindly attacking. They knew exactly where to strike. They understood the Empire's systems as if they had built them. Rage replaced his hesitation. He ordered immediate activation of the superweapon, even at reduced power. If humanity wanted to approach the core, they would face annihilation. Deep in space near the capital's outer defense ring, a massive structure unfolded like a mechanical flower. Energy gathered at its center, brighter than any star. Sensors across the galaxy detected the surge. On the dawn of Sol, Aaron watched as projections calculated possible impact zones. At full strength, the blast could erase multiple systems. At reduced strength, it would still destroy thousands of ships. There was no more time for slow strategy. Aaron gave a single command. All fleets converge. The scattered human forces across different systems changed course at once, jumping toward the capital region. It was risky. Concentrating the fleet meant exposing Earth's outer defenses. But this was the moment the war would turn. As human ships assembled in tight formation facing the glowing superweapon, silence filled the command decks. Every person understood the danger ahead. They had prepared for 3,000 years for this return. They had rebuilt from ashes and exile. Now they stood at the edge of either victory or extinction once again. Aaron looked at the massive energy sphere growing brighter in the distance. His voice was steady when he spoke. Humanity survived the fire once. We will survive it again. Engines flared. Shields expanded to maximum capacity. And as the superweapon reached full charge, the final confrontation of Phase 2 began. The superweapon glowed like a newborn star in the darkness of space, its energy core expanding with dangerous brightness. Waves of radiation rolled outward, shaking nearby ships and distorting sensors. The structure itself was enormous, larger than most moons, covered in rotating rings that focused power into a single point. Inside the Empire's capital system, military commanders watched with confidence returning to their faces. They believed this would end the war in one strike. For thousands of years, no enemy had survived the superweapon. They expected the same result now. But the humans facing it were not the same species the Empire had once destroyed. On the bridge of the Dawn of Sol, Commander Aaron Vale studied the incoming energy readings carefully. The weapon was charging faster than expected, even with damaged relays. There would be no time for a second strike if this one succeeded. Humanity had prepared a countermeasure during Exile, but had never been tested against a weapon of this scale. Aaron opened a secure channel across the entire fleet. His voice carried calm strength. He did not speak of revenge or anger. He spoke of survival and unity. He reminded them of Earth's fall, of the generations born in deep space, of the promise that humanity would never be erased again. When he finished, there was no cheering. There was only silence and readiness. Human ships shifted formation into a massive layered shield grid. Smaller vessels moved inward, while capital ships formed the outer ring. Specialized energy amplifiers extended from their hulls, linking together through precise synchronization. It was a network design called the Aegis Array, created by human scientists centuries earlier. The idea was simple but powerful. Instead of each ship defending alone, the fleet would share energy and distribute impact across thousands of vessels. If the system worked, the blast might be absorbed. If it failed, the fleet would vanish in seconds. In the capital palace, the Emperor gave the final order. Fire. The super weapon released its power in a blinding beam of pure destruction. Space itself seemed to bend as the energy wave expanded outward. Planets trembled in distant orbits. Shockwaves rippled across defense stations. The beam struck the human fleet with unstoppable force. For a moment, everything disappeared in white light. Inside human ships, alarms screamed as shields reached maximum capacity instantly. The Aegis Array activated fully, transferring energy between vessels at incredible speed. Outer ships took the first impact, their hulls glowing red under the pressure. Some exploded, unable to handle the strain. But their energy was not lost. It flowed into the grid, strengthening the inner layers. Aaron gripped the command rail as the Dawn of Sol shook violently. Reports flooded his screen. Casualties rising. Systems overheating. But the shield network was holding. The beam continued for long seconds that felt like eternity. Then, slowly, its brightness began to fade. The superweapon's core destabilized under its own power draw, weakened by the earlier relay sabotage. When the light finally cleared, smoke and debris filled the battlefield. Dozens of human ships were gone, sacrificed to protect the rest. But the fleet still stood. The Aegis Array had survived. Across the capital system, disbelief spread through Imperial forces. The impossible had happened. The superweapon had fired at near full strength, and humanity remained. On the Dawn of Sol, damaged systems flickered back online. Aaron looked at the surviving fleet and gave his next order without hesitation. Advance. Before the Empire could recharge or repair, human ships surged forward. Fighter squadrons targeted the weakened superweapon structure. Precision strikes hit its exposed energy conduits. Boarding pods launched toward its surface, carrying elite human units trained for zero-gravity assault. Inside the massive structure, alien engineers tried to stabilize the core, but human teams moved quickly through corridors, disabling control nodes and security systems. Within minutes, controlled detonations spread across the weapon's outer rings. The enormous structure began to collapse inward, its power fading into harmless light as failsafes were triggered. The Empire's greatest weapon was silenced. In the capital palace, the Emperor watched the destruction through a live tactical feed. For the first time in his rule, fear showed openly on his face. The superweapon was not only a tool of war. It was a symbol of invincibility. Its fall meant something deeper than military loss. It meant the Empire could bleed. Human fleets continued their push, now meeting scattered and confused resistance. Without the superweapon to rely on, Imperial commanders were forced into direct engagement. Several fierce battles broke out near defense platforms protecting the inner worlds. But morale among Imperial forces was shaken. Many ships retreated earlier than expected. Some captains surrendered rather than face total destruction. Meanwhile, transmissions from oppressed systems multiplied. Seeing the superweapon destroyed gave courage to those who had suffered under Imperial control. Rebellions ignited across multiple sectors. Supply lines broke completely. The Empire was no longer fighting a single enemy. It was facing collapse from within and without. Back in the Sol system, news of the fleet's survival reached Earth. Crowds gathered in newly rebuilt cities to watch live feeds from the front lines. For 3,000 years, humanity had carried the memory of defeat. Now, they witnessed something different. They witnessed strength earned through patience and unity. Aaron stood quietly as damage reports continued. The cost had been high. Many ships were lost. Many names would be remembered. But extinction had been avoided again. Humanity had faced a fire that once destroyed it and endured. As the human fleet reorganized near the capital's outer defenses, one final message was prepared. It was sent directly to the Emperor's palace on an open channel. Aaron's image appeared once more, calm and steady. The superweapon failed, he said. This war does not need to continue. Stand down, and the cycle of destruction ends here. The transmission ended without threat or insult. The choice now rested with the Empire. In the silent chamber of the Golden Palace, surrounded by advisors filled with panic, the Emperor stared at the fading image of the human commander. For the first time in 3,000 years, the ruler of the galaxy faced a truth he could no longer deny. Humanity had not returned for simple revenge. Humanity had returned to change the balance of power forever. The silence after the fall of the superweapon was heavier than the battle itself. Across the capital system, drifting debris from the destroyed structure reflected distant starlight like broken glass. Imperial fleets regrouped behind defensive lines closer to the inner worlds, unsure whether to attack or retreat. For the first time in thousands of years, the Empire was reacting instead of commanding. On the dawn of Sol, Commander Aaron Vale studied the updated tactical map. The path to the capital planet was open, but not unguarded. Heavy defense platforms, minefields, and layered shield arrays protected the final approach. A direct assault would cost millions of lives on both sides. Humanity had not endured exile for 3,000 years to win through reckless destruction. Aaron knew the next phase would not be decided by firepower alone. It would be decided by the mind. Instead of launching an immediate attack, the human fleet stopped just outside the inner defense perimeter. This pause confused Imperial commanders. They expected humans to push forward after their victory. Instead, they received something unexpected. A wide-range transmission spread across the entire capital system and beyond. It was not a threat. It was not propaganda filled with lies. It was evidence. The recording of Earth's destruction played again, but this time it included additional data recovered from the Luna monitoring station. Imperial command logs were exposed, showing clear orders given 3,000 years ago to eliminate not just military targets but civilian evacuation ships. The truth was undeniable. Billions had been destroyed, not for defense, but to make an example. Along with the recordings, humanity broadcast a simple statement. We do not seek to erase your species. We seek to end oppression. Lay down your weapons, and you will live. Resist, and your leaders will fall. The message spread through civilian networks inside the capital system. For generations, citizens had believed the official version of history, that Earth had been a dangerous aggressor that forced the Empire to act. Now they saw another story. Protests began in several urban districts. Military families demanded answers from their leaders. Some lower-ranking officers refused orders to prepare for suicidal counterattacks. In the Golden Palace, the Emperor's advisors argued loudly. Some demanded immediate assault on the human fleet before rebellion grew stronger. Others warned that internal stability was collapsing. The Emperor remained silent for a long time. He had ruled with absolute authority, but now that authority was cracking. Meanwhile, Aaron prepared the next move carefully. Human intelligence units had identified key communication hubs inside the capital system that controlled planetary defense coordination. Rather than destroy them with orbital bombardment, Aaron sent stealth infiltration teams using advanced cloaking transports. Their mission was not to kill civilians or cause chaos. Their mission was to disable central control systems and replace them with open broadcast networks. Within hours, several primary communication towers shifted from Imperial encryption to open signal. Across the capital planet, screens flickered as the Imperial emblem was replaced by a neutral symbol, a simple image of Earth rising from ashes. Aaron appeared once more, but this time he spoke directly to the citizens of the Empire. He did not insult them. He did not blame ordinary people. He separated the rulers from the ruled. He explained that humanity had survived in exile, that it had rebuilt not to conquer, but to prevent future genocide. He offered safe surrender terms to all military units willing to stand down. The psychological effect was immediate. Several outer defense stations powered down their weapons voluntarily. A group of capital defense cruisers signaled ceasefire and requested negotiation. Imperial loyalists attempted to regain control of communication networks, but human cyber units had already embedded counter systems deep inside the infrastructure. The Empire was losing control of its own voice. In response, the Emperor finally made a drastic decision. He ordered the activation of the Royal Guard fleet, an elite force personally loyal to him and stationed in orbit around the capital planet. These ships were newer, stronger, and commanded by officers chosen for absolute loyalty. If fear would not stop humanity, force would. The Royal Guard fleet moved forward in tight formation, shields glowing bright. Their commander broadcast a final warning to the human fleet, demanding immediate withdrawal from the capital system. Aaron listened calmly. He understood that this confrontation was unavoidable. The Emperor needed one last show of strength to hold his power. Aaron gave a quiet order. Target only the Royal Guard command ships. Disable, do not destroy unless necessary. The battle that followed was intense but controlled. Royal Guard vessels fought fiercely, refusing surrender. Human ships responded with precise strikes, using electromagnetic pulses to overload weapon systems without causing massive hull breaches. Several Guard cruisers were disabled within minutes. However, a small group pushed through the human front line and aimed directly for the Dawn of Soul, hoping to eliminate Aaron and break human coordination. In a critical moment, Captain Lena Mar of the human cruiser Horizon Shield maneuvered her ship between the incoming fire and the flagship. Her vessel absorbed multiple direct hits, shields collapsing under pressure. With her final command, she ordered her crew to evacuate through emergency pods before initiating a controlled overload that disabled the attacking Guard ships. The Horizon Shield was lost, but the Dawn of Soul survived. The sacrifice spread quickly across all channels. Instead of weakening morale, it strengthened it. Humanity was not fighting for domination. It was fighting for survival and justice. The Royal Guard fleet, now heavily damaged and leaderless, began to surrender in increasing numbers. On the capital planet below, citizens watched the battle in real time. They saw their elite protectors fall not to overwhelming cruelty, but to disciplined strategy. The idea of imperial invincibility shattered completely. Inside the palace, alarms signaled that multiple defense layers had gone offline due to voluntary shutdowns. Advisors urged the Emperor to flee to a secondary system and continue resistance from there. But escape would mean admitting defeat. As human ships moved into stable orbit above the capital, Aaron prepared one final transmission, this time directed only to the Emperor. The message was simple. This ends now. Step down, and your people will be spared. Continue, and your empire falls completely. In the silent throne chamber, surrounded by fading symbols of power, the Emperor stared at the tactical display showing human ships surrounding his world. 3,000 years ago, he had believed humanity was erased forever. Now those same humans stood at his door, not as victims, but as equals who had survived the fire and returned stronger. The next decision would decide the fate of the entire galaxy. The The capital planet of the Empire had never known silence like this. Massive cities that once shined with endless light now stood under the shadow of thousands of human ships in orbit. Trade lanes were frozen. Defense cannons remained powered down. The people watched the sky, waiting for either destruction or change. Inside the Golden Palace, the Emperor stood alone before a wide window overlooking his world. The human fleet surrounded his system completely. Every escape route was blocked. Every major defense station was either disabled or had surrendered. Yet he still had one final option, one final move hidden from both his council and his enemies. Deep beneath the palace, in a chamber sealed since ancient times, lay the throne protocol. It was not a weapon like the super cannon that had already failed. It was something far worse. It was a planetary core destabilizer designed as a last resort. If activated, it would trigger a chain reaction inside the capital planet's core, turning the entire world into a collapsing firestorm. Billions would die, including the Emperor himself. But it would also create a shockwave strong enough to damage or destroy much of the human fleet in orbit. It was the ultimate act of denial. If the Empire could not rule, no one would. The Emperor activated the sealed chamber and descended alone. Meanwhile, on the dawn of Sol, Commander Aaron Vale received unusual energy readings from the planet's core. At first, the data seemed like natural fluctuations. But within minutes, the pattern became clear. Energy levels were rising rapidly in a controlled sequence. This was not natural. It was deliberate. Aaron's expression hardened. He understood immediately. The Emperor was willing to destroy his own world rather than surrender it. Aaron ordered full planetary scans and emergency evacuation alerts broadcast across the capital. Human ships began transmitting urgent warnings to civilians, instructing them to move to underground shelters and prepare for possible impact. Some Imperial officers, now cooperating with human command, confirmed the existence of the throne protocol. Panic spread through the lower levels of the palace as advisors realized what the Emperor intended to do. Several tried to reach him, but access to the core chamber had already been sealed. Aaron faced a terrible choice. If the destabilizer reached full activation, the explosion would devastate the system. The human fleet could attempt to retreat to safer distance, but that would abandon billions of innocent lives. Humanity had returned to prevent genocide, not to watch another one happen. There was only one option. A strike team would have to enter the palace and disable the device directly. It was a mission with almost no chance of survival. The destabilizer was protected by ancient defense systems and locked deep within the planet's mantle. Aaron did not hesitate. He selected the most experienced special operations unit in the fleet, led by Captain Ishan Rao. Within minutes, a stealth insertion craft launched from the dawn of Sol and descended toward the capital under heavy electronic camouflage. Imperial loyalist forces still inside the palace detected the intrusion and engaged immediately. The human team fought through corridors of gold and steel, moving with precision and speed. Their objective was not conquest. It was prevention. Deep underground, the Emperor stood before the glowing control interface of the throne protocol. The core stabilizers were already failing. Lava currents far below were beginning to shift violently. He believed he was protecting the honor of his empire. He believed that if he could not win, at least he would deny victory to humanity. But even as he prepared to finalize activation, a security alert flashed across his display. Intruders approaching the core chamber. Human life signs detected. Back in orbit, Aaron monitored the mission in real time. Energy spikes increased every minute. The window for success was closing. Human ships deployed massive stabilization beams toward the planet's surface, attempting to slow the destabilization process. These beams could only delay, not stop, the reaction. Everything depended on Captain Rao's team. After intense combat against palace guards, the human unit reached the final blast doors leading to the core chamber. Automated defenses activated, filling the corridor with heavy fire. 2 human soldiers fell protecting their team as engineers worked quickly to override the ancient locking system. Finally, the The doors opened. Inside, heat radiated from the glowing control pillar connected directly to the planet's core. The Emperor turned to face the intruders. He did not raise a weapon. Instead, he spoke calmly, almost sadly. He told them that empires do not fall peacefully. He claimed that humanity would only repeat the same cycle of conquest. Captain Rao responded firmly that humanity had already broken that cycle by choosing survival over revenge. A brief struggle followed as the Emperor attempted to trigger the final sequence manually. Rao tackled him away from the console while his engineer began disabling the core interface. The destabilization had reached critical levels. If the shutdown was not completed in seconds, the chain reaction would become unstoppable. Sparks flew as systems overloaded. In orbit, Aaron watched the energy readings peak dangerously. Then suddenly the spike flattened. The stabilization beams from the fleet synchronized perfectly with the shutdown inside the core. The reaction slowed. Lava currents returned to normal flow. The throne protocol was stopped. On the planet's surface, alarms ceased. Citizens felt the tremors fade beneath their feet. In the palace chamber, Captain Rao restrained the Emperor as human forces secured the room. The ruler of the empire looked defeated, not by weapons, but by refusal. He had been ready to destroy everything. Humanity had chosen to save it instead. Back on the dawn of Sol, relief spread quietly across the bridge. Aaron closed his eyes for a brief moment. Another extinction had been prevented. The capital planet still stood. The human fleet remained intact, but the Empire's authority was gone. With the throne protocol exposed and stopped, the final illusion of control had vanished. Across the galaxy, news spread quickly. Humanity had not only survived destruction once, it had now prevented it for another world. The difference between the two civilizations was clear to everyone watching. One ruled through fear. The other endured through unity. As the Emperor was escorted into custody, the long war that began 3,000 years ago entered its final chapter. The arrest of the Emperor sent a shockwave through the entire capital system. For centuries, he had been seen as untouchable, the living symbol of imperial power. Now he was escorted through his own palace by human soldiers and former members of his royal guard who had chosen to stand down rather than die for a collapsing throne. Outside, in the skies above the capital planet, the human fleet maintained position but did not fire a single shot. There was no celebration, no victory parade. Commander Aaron Vale understood that what happened next would decide whether this moment became true change or the beginning of another cycle of hatred. Across the planet, citizens gathered in public squares and inside homes, watching live transmissions as emergency leadership councils formed. Many were afraid that humanity would now claim the capital as its own prize. Others feared chaos without imperial control. To prevent panic, Aaron authorized an open broadcast from orbit. His image appeared again across planetary networks, this time not as a commander in battle, but as a leader offering direction. He explained clearly that humanity would not annex the capital world. There would be no occupation, no forced rule. The Emperor would face trial before an interstellar council made up of multiple species, including representatives from worlds once conquered by the Empire. The people of the capital were told they would choose their own new government. Humanity's fleet would remain only long enough to ensure stability and prevent further violence. The message surprised many. Some imperial officers expected mass arrests and harsh punishment. Instead, human forces worked with local security to restore order, reopen transport lines, and distribute emergency supplies after the near-core destabilization. Medical ships treated injured civilians regardless of species. The contrast between what the Emperor had been willing to do and what humanity was doing now became impossible to ignore. In distant systems that once served the Empire, governors began declaring independence openly. Some pledged alliance with humanity. Others simply declared neutrality. The imperial banner that had flown for thousands of years was lowered on world after world. A new symbol began appearing on communication channels, a simple emblem of a rising sun over a restored Earth. It did not represent domination. It represented survival. On the dawn of Sol, Aaron met with leaders from several former subject species through secure hollow links. These leaders had long suffered under heavy taxation and military control. They asked what humanity wanted in return for its help. Aaron's answer was direct: mutual defense and open cooperation. No forced tribute, no slave labor, no cultural erasure. The offer marked a new model of alliance in the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, a major power proposed unity without conquest. Meanwhile, inside a secure holding chamber beneath the palace, the former emperor sat quietly under guard. He was no longer surrounded by gold or advisors. The silence around him was different from the silence of power. It was the silence of consequence. When Aaron finally entered the chamber to speak with him face to face, there was no anger in his expression. The emperor asked why humanity had not destroyed the capital when it had the chance. Aaron answered simply that destruction would not rebuild Earth and would not honor the lives lost 3,000 years ago. Justice was not the same as revenge. The emperor had built his rule on fear. Humanity had rebuilt itself on patience. That difference had decided the war long before the first shot was fired. Outside the chamber, preparations began for the Interstellar Tribunal. Evidence gathered from the Luna Monitoring Station, from Imperial archives, and from surviving witnesses was organized carefully. Humanity insisted that the trial be transparent, broadcast across all major systems. The galaxy would see not just the crimes, but the process of accountability. This approach strengthened humanity's position even more. Worlds that had once doubted human intentions now saw consistency between words and actions. As days passed, the capital planet slowly stabilized. Curfews were lifted. Markets reopened under temporary civilian councils. Human engineers assisted in repairing infrastructure damaged during the battles. The presence of the fleet above became less threatening and more protective. Rumors of loyalist uprisings faded as former military leaders publicly renounced the old regime. Across the galaxy, trade routes began shifting toward new alliances forming around Earth. The balance of power had changed completely. Yet Aaron remained cautious. Victory could create arrogance just as easily as defeat could create desperation. He addressed the entire human fleet in a private transmission. He reminded them that their mission had always been larger than revenge. Humanity had proven it could survive annihilation. Now it needed to prove it could lead responsibly. Discipline would remain strict. Any act of cruelty or exploitation by human forces would be punished immediately. The war was ending, but the test of character was just beginning. On Earth, celebrations were held quietly in rebuilt cities. People gathered near restored oceans and under newly cleared skies to watch the tribunal's first session begin. For 3,000 years, humanity had carried the weight of exile. Now that weight was lifting, replaced by responsibility. Children who had grown up hearing stories of ashes and escape were witnessing something different. A future built not on fear, but on choice. As the tribunal formally opened and the former emperor stood before representatives of multiple worlds, the galaxy watched in silence. The outcome would shape a new era. Humanity had risen from the ashes not as a conqueror, but as a survivor determined to end the cycle of destruction. The war that began with fire was closing with judgment. And in that judgment, a new chapter of galactic history was being written. The tribunal began in a grand chamber built for generations of imperial rulers. Yet for the first time, it did not serve the powerful. It served justice. Delegates from dozens of worlds, many of which had once suffered under the Empire, took their seats. Representatives from human colonies, including those who had survived the Exodus, joined as observers and witnesses. The former emperor stood at the center, restrained but dignified, his golden robes replaced by simple garments. For centuries, he had ruled with absolute authority, yet now he faced judgment from those he once considered beneath him. Commander Aaron Vale watched the proceedings from a secure observation platform above the capital. He did not participate directly. for this was not humanity's trial to control. He only ensured the safety of all parties and the transparency of the event. Hollow projections displayed evidence of crimes committed over 3,000 years, destroyed worlds, civilian massacres, stolen resources, and secret operations designed to crush rebellions before they could form. Survivor testimonies were broadcast alongside recovered imperial communications, showing the emperor's direct involvement in ordering exterminations. As the presentations continued, murmurs spread across the chamber. Some delegates expressed shock that such atrocities had occurred, while others quietly nodded, for they had known the empire's cruelty firsthand. The emperor remained calm at first, answering questions with practiced deflection and claiming that decisions had been made to preserve stability. But as more evidence surfaced, detailing innocent lives lost across countless systems, cracks appeared in his composure. The tribunal's lead prosecutor addressed him directly. "You destroyed civilizations, manipulated populations, and created fear as a weapon. For 3,000 years, countless lives have suffered because of your command. How do you answer for this?" The emperor's voice faltered. He insisted he had acted in the interest of order, that the galaxy required strong leadership to survive. Yet the tribunal had already heard testimony from former imperial officers who had followed his orders without question, revealing that obedience had been coerced through fear, not loyalty. The more the emperor tried to defend himself, the more evident it became that his rule had been built entirely on intimidation. Across the galaxy, transmissions of the tribunal reached systems that had previously hidden under imperial control. Citizens, soldiers, and merchants alike watched in amazement. The story of humanity's survival and the exposure of the empire's crimes spread faster than any fleet could travel. Aaron observed these reactions quietly. He had long understood that the greatest power humanity held was the truth. The tribunal continued for days, sometimes into the nights, with sessions covering every aspect of the empire's oppression. The emperor was forced to acknowledge decisions that led to the deaths of billions. Witness after witness described the pain, fear, and courage of those who resisted, and each testimony chipped away at the myth of infallibility that had surrounded the emperor for generations. Human representatives took care to ensure that proceedings were fair. They intervened only to maintain order and to protect witnesses from intimidation or retaliation. Unlike past rulers, humanity did not seek vengeance. Their role was to guarantee justice and accountability, not to seize control. For many citizens of the former empire, this was the first time they truly understood the magnitude of what had been done in their name. Fear began to dissolve, replaced by hope. People who had grown up believing they were subjects of a perfect, untouchable ruler now realized that change was possible. On the final day of the tribunal, after thousands of hours of evidence and testimony, the council gathered to deliver judgment. The emperor stood silently, listening as representatives from across the galaxy spoke of responsibility, restitution, and the need to build a better future. He was stripped of all titles, lands, and command. The tribunal decreed that he would be confined under secure observation, removed from any position of power, and that the governance of the former empire would transition to independent planetary councils, guided by principles of cooperation, justice, and shared defense. Humanity's role was clear: protect, advise, and ensure no resurgence of oppression occurred. Once the judgment was delivered, celebrations were not grand, for humanity did not rejoice in the fall of a ruler. Instead, communities across the galaxy quietly began rebuilding. Trade resumed between worlds, new alliances formed, and systems once dominated by fear now experimented with self-governance. For the first time in millennia, multiple species worked together on equal footing. Back on Earth, the human colonies gathered to commemorate the end of the war and the beginning of a new era. Oceans, forests, and cities were being restored. Children played under skies that were once choked with ash, learning stories of endurance, survival, and the importance of justice over revenge. Aaron addressed the assembled leaders and citizens from a restored Earth plaza. His message was simple but powerful. Humanity had survived annihilation. It had endured exile, rebuilt from nothing, and returned not to conquer, but to protect. He reminded them that the galaxy would not be free overnight, that vigilance and cooperation would be required to maintain peace. Yet for the first time in generations, people felt hope. In the former empire's capital, councils of former imperial officers and citizens began drafting new laws based on equality, transparency, and accountability. Human advisors assisted in mediating disputes and ensuring fair representation. Slowly, the remnants of a once powerful regime transformed into a society guided not by fear, but by choice. Far above the capital planet, the human fleet maintained orbit, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Ships repaired, systems monitored, and patrols maintained the security of newly independent worlds. Humanity's presence served as a reminder that vigilance was necessary, but it was not a threat to freedom. As the first month of post-war reconstruction ended, Commander Aaron Vale reflected on the journey. From exile to survival, from ashes to victory, humanity had proven its resilience. The galaxy had witnessed that patience, intelligence, and moral restraint were as powerful as any weapon. And while challenges remained, a foundation had been laid for a future where species could coexist without domination. For 3,000 years, humanity had waited. Now, it had not only returned, but had reshaped the galaxy, creating a legacy of justice, cooperation, and hope that would endure far longer than any empire. The galaxy had entered a new era, one shaped not by fear or conquest, but by survival, cooperation, and careful vigilance. The human fleet, having secured the former imperial capital and ensured the emperor's containment, remained in orbit as both guardians and advisors. Commander Aaron Vale walked the bridge of the dawn of Sol, looking at the holographic maps of newly independent systems. Each star represented a world that had once been under oppressive control. Now, for the first time in millennia, these worlds had a choice. Humanity's centuries of exile had taught them patience, and Aaron understood that this moment required more than firepower. It required guidance, diplomacy, and careful observation. The reconstruction of the capital planet continued rapidly. Citizens repaired damaged infrastructure, reopened trade routes, and restored public services with the assistance of human engineers and advisors. Communications networks allowed neighboring systems to coordinate resources, medical supplies, and food distribution. Schools reopened to educate children who had never known life without fear. Earth had become a model for resilience, a symbol of what survival and unity could achieve. Aaron ensured that human influence was firm but fair. Humanity had returned from the ashes, but their mission was not domination. They had learned that the mistakes of the past, fueled by revenge or unchecked power, led to nothing but destruction. Across the galaxy, systems that once relied on imperial authority began forming alliances based on mutual benefit. Formerly subjugated species worked together to create councils that would prevent any single power from rising unchecked. Humanity acted as mediator and protector, intervening only when necessary to maintain stability. Many systems sent delegations to Earth to observe and learn from human governance, curious about how a civilization could survive 3,000 years of exile and return without hatred consuming them. Within the former capital, the human presence was both respected and cautious. Security patrols remained, but there was no imposition of martial law. Citizens were encouraged to rebuild their societies and claim leadership roles based on merit and trust. The emperor remained confined, isolated but alive, his influence gone. Some citizens continued to struggle with the idea that humanity had shown mercy. They had expected punishment, destruction, or humiliation, but instead, they saw guidance, restraint, and fairness. This approach created a new paradigm. People began questioning old loyalties and realized that power used responsibly could build trust instead of fear. In orbit, Aaron convened a meeting with senior fleet commanders. Reports indicated that while major Imperial forces had surrendered or been neutralized, isolated pockets of resistance still existed in distant systems. Pirates, rogue factions, and remaining Imperial loyalists threatened the fragile peace. The fleet would need to continue patrols, not to dominate, but to ensure safety and prevent the resurgence of tyranny. Aaron's orders were clear: engage only when necessary, prioritize civilian protection, and coordinate with local councils before taking action. Humanity's return was not only about reclaiming Earth, but about ensuring that the lessons of the past were remembered. The tribunals had exposed the truth, but history was fragile. Education became a critical mission. Human historians, scientists, and diplomats worked with former imperial citizens to establish archives, schools, and programs designed to prevent the repetition of past atrocities. Stories of survival, exile, and strategic patience were recorded alongside the brutal history of imperial conquest. Across multiple worlds, celebrations marked the first anniversaries of independence from the empire. But these celebrations were solemn as well as joyful, a recognition of the sacrifices that had been made. Monuments honored those lost during the invasion of Earth, the Exodus, and the battles that followed in the capital system. Human leaders encouraged citizens to remember history not with anger, but with clarity, using knowledge as a weapon against future oppression. In the fleet, Aaron watched as young officers trained for diplomacy and conflict resolution. Their education emphasized restraint, strategic thinking, and empathy. Unlike previous generations of humans who had relied on survival instinct alone, these officers would guide humanity in a galaxy now filled with fragile alliances and wary civilizations. Months passed, and systems once dependent on the Empire began to stabilize. Trade resumed on a larger scale, scientific projects restarted, and communication networks connected thousands of worlds. Humanity's example encouraged collaboration. Former adversaries began to discuss shared interests rather than focus on old rivalries. Even former imperial officers who had resisted human authority acknowledged the wisdom of guidance over domination. On Earth, the rebuilt cities reflected the same principles. Clean energy systems powered urban centers. Agriculture expanded to restore resources lost to centuries of neglect and war. Children learned not only about survival and strategy, but also about justice, ethics, and the importance of mercy. Humanity's story of returning from exile became a teaching tool, a reminder that patience, endurance, and moral strength could overcome even the darkest periods of history. Commander Aaron Vale spent long hours reflecting on the journey. From the ashes of a destroyed Earth to the establishment of a galactic peace guided by truth, humanity had achieved more than survival. It set a new standard. The galaxy would never again believe that humans could be eradicated, but would also see that power wielded with discipline could protect rather than destroy. And while challenges remained, isolated uprisings, rogue fleets, and the shadow of imperial loyalists, the foundation was laid. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, but as stewards of a galaxy now able to imagine a future beyond fear. On the bridge of the dawn of Sol, Aaron looked at the stars stretching infinitely ahead. Each light represented a world, a people, a history, and a choice. Humanity had survived exile, returned from ashes, and reshaped the galaxy not with weapons alone, but with patience, strategy, and moral courage. The journey had begun 3,000 years ago, but its legacy would endure for millennia. The galaxy, once ruled by fear, now had a chance at hope. And for the first time in thousands of years, Commander Aaron allowed himself a quiet thought. Humanity had not only returned, it had finally found its place among the stars.